Dusk in the Amazon is not silence but saturation, a flood of competing frequencies, each creature broadcasting its own existence into the thickening dark. Cicadas vibrate the air into a haze, frogs sink in pulses along flooded routes, and far above, nightjars begin their long, echoing trills. Beneath this living static, a shape moves, low, fluid and silent, the patterned shadow of an ocelot slipping between liana loops and fallen palm fronds. Its body, less than twice the size of a house cat, belongs to one of the forest's most methodical hunters. But unlike its heavier cousins, the jaguar that crushes skulls, the puma that bounds across ridges, the ocelot relies on manipulation. Its power is not only in its claws, but in the precision of its voice. The ocelot hunts in a world ruled by sound. In the dim, under-canopy half-light where sight collapses, the jungle speaks instead of showing. Small mammals, birds and reptiles live by auditory pattern. The rustle that means danger, the chirp that means safety, the call that means a mate or a meal. And this is where the ocelot has learned to cheat. Naturalists once dismissed stories from indigenous trackers who claimed to hear cats mimicking the cries of prey to lure them closer. But modern bioacoustics has confirmed what folklore always suspected. In certain moments, when prey density is high and moonlight thin, the ocelot becomes a ventriloquist. Recordings from the Peruvian Amazon captured an ocelot imitating the begging chirps of a baby tamarin. The real monkeys, hidden in the canopy, descended in alarm. Exactly the reaction a predator could weaponize. How the ocelot achieves this feat remains an open question. Its vocal range is unusually broad for its size, from guttural growls to high-pitched mews and short, repetitive whistles. The shape of its larynx allows fine-tuned control of resonance, while the nasal passages give tonal modulation that can imitate distress calls of smaller species. Evolution may have favored this mimicry not as a fixed adaptation, but as an opportunistic behavior, one learned by observation, refined through experience, and deployed only when conditions align. In a soundscape as dense as the rainforest, where thousands of voices blur into a constant roar, the ability to slip in a false frequency is the ultimate ambush weapon. One wrong note can mean curiosity, and curiosity brings movement. Movement is what the ocelot needs. Cameras fitted with directional microphones reveal the setup of these sonic traps. The cat sits motionless near a clearing edge or at the base of a fruiting tree where rodents feed. For long minutes, it emits soft chirps or squeaks, each one spaced irregularly as though to mimic the erratic rhythm of a real animal in trouble. The sound is quiet enough to blend with the ambient noise, but local enough to suggest proximity. Eventually, a mouse opossum or ground dove moves closer to investigate. What happens next is nearly invisible, a flicker, a crackle of leaves, and silence again. The ocelot feeds quickly, head low, swallowing before the forest has time to reset. This strategy, predation by deception, mirrors techniques used by deep-sea anglerfish, mimic octopuses, and even certain orchids that lure pollinators with false pheromones. The ocelot's mimicry is a terrestrial echo of that evolutionary idea. When direct pursuit fails, simulation can succeed. Energy budgets in the rainforest are unforgiving. A single failed chase costs as much as a day's rest. For a small cat competing with larger felids and packs of omnivorous mammals, efficiency becomes survival. By turning sound into bait, the ocelot rewrites the energy equation. The forest may be full of life, but abundance does not mean opportunity. Only those who manipulate the code of attention thrive. In this acoustic arms race, prey too have evolved countermeasures. Many species rely on call verification, recognizing subtle harmonic structures that distinguish real conspecifics from imitations. Some birds, like tinnitus, use multi-layered harmonics impossible for most mammals to replicate. Others shift their call patterns nightly, changing pitch or sequence to outpace mimicry. Yet the ocelot's power lies in its adaptability. It doesn't mimic a single species, but the type of distress that activates predator or parent reflexes across taxa. A sharp staccato squeak, universally linked to alarm or injury, transcends species boundaries. It is the biological equivalent of a universal password. But the imitation's success depends on timing and placement. During dusk and dawn, the ocelot's prime hours, the forest's light gradient amplifies acoustic contrast. Low light cools the air, and cooler air carries sound differently. Layers of humidity and temperature bend calls, distorting direction cues. In these conditions, a false call can sound nearer, clearer, or more urgent than it truly is. The ocelot positions itself at acoustic choke points, fallen logs that create echo chambers, small gullies that funnel noise, or tree buttresses that reflect sound in narrow beams. It is not just calling, it is aiming its sound. To visualize this hidden battlefield, researchers now use spectrograms, color-coded maps of frequency against time, that expose mimicry patterns invisible to the ear. Ocelot calls show frequency modulations nearly identical to their supposed prey species, sometimes differing by less than 100 Hz. But the giveaway lies in rhythm. The ocelot's versions lack the micro-variations of stress and breath typical of true distress. That imperfection may not matter. Most prey wired for survival rather than music theory respond instinctively before verifying. The cat exploits the milliseconds between curiosity and caution. The ecological consequences ripple outward. By preying efficiently, the ocelot helps regulate populations of small mammals that disperse seeds and insects that control foliage turnover. Remove the ocelot, and mid-level prey populations explode, altering undergrowth density and nutrient cycling. Its mimicry may seem like trickery, but in the vast equation of rainforest stability, deceit has a purpose. The false voice sustains balance. Still, one cannot escape the eerie implication: the jungle's chorus is not honest. Every sound carries uncertainty. Is that a chick calling, or the throat of a hunter? Is that rustle a lizard or the sound of intent? For creatures that live by their ears, the cost of curiosity is death. And for scientists listening through the static of night recordings, the challenge is the same: to tell reality from imitation. Somewhere deep under the canopy, the ocelot pauses mid-step. Its rosetted fur breaks the moonlight into fragments. Dew beads glint along its whiskers. It hears a squeal in the leaf litter, faint, frantic, believable. But tonight it is not the one making the sound. A younger ocelot nearby has learned the trick. The master turns its head, expression unreadable, as if considering the echo of its own deception. The forest listens, indifferent yet alive, its every sound a question. In a world that never stops speaking, how do you know who is really calling? If the jungle is loud, one wrong sound matters, because in the Amazon, truth and survival are the same frequency. Night settles over the forest floor like a closing hand. Humidity rises, and the air thickens until breath itself feels heavy. Beneath this shifting quilt of heat, one form does not move. It lies coiled beneath a buttressed tree, half buried in leaf litter, its presence defined not by motion, but by the perfect absence of it. The bushmaster, Lachesis muta, the largest venomous snake in the Americas, and among the most patient hunters on Earth. Its body, patterned in dull gold and brown, mirrors the geometry of decaying leaves. Every scale catches the dim shimmer of bioluminescent fungi, scattering light into invisibility. But to the bushmaster, vision is secondary. Its universe is thermal. Through a pair of deep, pit-shaped organs between each eye and nostril, the snake reads infrared radiation with the precision of a sensor array. It sees the forest not in shapes or color, but in gradients of heat, each living being glowing faintly against the cooler background of soil and debris. In this silent world of temperature, the bushmaster reigns as the supreme algorithm of ambush. To understand the bushmaster's hunt, one must think in thermodynamics, not emotion. The forest floor is not flat. It is a fractal surface of depressions, ridges, and buried voids beneath decomposing leaves. Warm-blooded animals crossing this terrain leak heat into the air column around them, their warmth spilling into micro-valleys, caught between the curled edges of leaves like water in miniature basins. In infrared, these zones glow faintly brighter, forming invisible thermal funnels that guide radiant energy downward. It is within these invisible corridors that the bushmaster often lies waiting. Scientists have begun to ask whether this pattern is coincidence or design. When thermal cameras were placed above known bushmaster ambush sites, a curious regularity emerged. The snakes were not scattered randomly, but positioned at the base of shallow concavities in the litter. Natural heat sinks where small mammals' thermal signatures converged. In a landscape defined by chaos, the snake appeared to follow a form of thermal geometry, exploiting the passive flow of body heat like a hunter reading the current of a river. The principle is elegantly simple. Warm air rises, but radiant heat, especially from small mammals close to the ground, often reflects and channels through surfaces with differing conductivity. Dry leaves, twigs, and bark fragments act as semi-insulating layers. Pockets of damp humus between them trap warmth. The bushmaster, by placing its head just beneath these layers, positions its heat-sensing pits at the precise level where contrast is sharpest. It is like setting a camera lens at the focal plane of a hidden world, one where movement is secondary to gradient. A passing rat does not need to step directly over the snake. It merely needs to walk near enough that its heat signature bends through the litter's contours and triggers a strike. For hours, even days, the snake remains in this self-calculated stillness. Its muscles rest in slow, aerobic readiness. Heartbeat drops to near the edge of perception. Respiration barely stirs the debris above. The bushmaster's metabolism is an engineering marvel, a system designed for endurance, not pursuit. When the right pattern appears, a burst of warmth, a shift in amplitude, the smooth curve of mammalian motion, the strike comes with mechanical precision. Coiled energy becomes linear fury, a single thrust lasting less than a third of a second, guided not by sight but by infrared alignment. The fangs, nearly 2 inches long, deliver a venom dose capable of shutting down the prey's nervous system in seconds. And then, as abruptly as it moved, the serpent becomes inert again. The thermal field collapses back into equilibrium. Evolution built this design through pressure, not choice. The bushmaster's enormous size, often exceeding 3 meters, makes pursuit impossible. It cannot chase or climb with speed, but it can calculate. Its hunting method converts geometry and physics into survival strategy. Unlike the pit vipers of temperate forests that track rodents through scent trails or motion, Lachesis operates almost purely on thermographic inference. Some herpetologists refer to this as heat triangulation. By comparing the temperature differential between its two facial pits, the snake can localize prey direction to within a few centimeters, even in total darkness. In laboratory tests, blindfolded bushmasters still struck accurately at warm targets, evidence that vision has become redundant to this sensory system. The ecological implications are vast. The bushmaster is not a common snake. It reproduces infrequently, and its home range spans kilometers. But its presence exerts silent control over the behavior of rodents and small marsupials. In areas where bushmasters are common, prey pathways shift. Heat-producing animals learn through generations of selection to avoid thermal choke points, depressions, fallen leaves, root tangles, even when food is present. The result is a spatial pattern of fear, invisible to humans, but etched into the behavior of the forest's nocturnal mammals. The snake, by merely existing, reshapes the thermal architecture of the jungle. To visualize this, researchers deployed drone-mounted infrared sensors after dusk. The view is breathtaking, a living map of heat signatures drifting across a sea of cooler soil. Amid this shifting constellation of red and orange, a single void appears, the bushmaster. Its scales, cooled to near ambient temperature, erase its body from the thermal scene. Only the faintest glint from its open pits betrays its position. Around it, invisible eddies of warmth drift and pool, forming a dynamic topography of opportunity. Every step of a rodent is a disturbance in this field, and the snake reads it as fluently as text. The geometry of leaf litter becomes more than camouflage. It is the medium of its sensory world. Each leaf curve redirects heat. Each fallen twig refracts infrared waves. The bushmaster's stillness allows the forest itself to act as an instrument, amplifying signals through natural physics. One could almost say the snake builds its own radar dish from decay. The deeper insight is that this isn't conscious design, it's evolutionary resonance. Across millennia, individuals that happened to settle in these micro-bowls of warmth succeeded more often. Over time, behavior refined itself into instinct. What appears as intelligence is, in truth, selection encoded through uncountable patient nights. When dawn approaches, the forest shifts again. As sunlight filters through the canopy, the heat gradient flattens. The world becomes uniformly warm, and the bushmaster's advantage dissolves. It retreats deeper into shade, to burrows and root hollows where temperature contrasts persist. Its body absorbs warmth passively, readying enzymes for the next slow digestion. Unlike many vipers, it can go months between meals, a design tuned to scarcity and patience. Its very physiology is a study in restraint. Powerful venom glands balanced by an unhurried metabolism, sensory organs built for microscopic differentials rather than spectacle. And so, when one walks through the Amazon and feels the oppressive stillness at night, that uncanny sense that the ground is watching, one may be feeling not paranoia, but physics. The bushmaster's presence transforms the forest floor into a layered equation of heat, geometry, and death. Its role is not cruelty, but calibration. The snake enforces a thermal order, thinning the reckless, selecting for caution, keeping balance in a system that feeds on itself. Beneath its composure lies a principle more elegant than predation, a proof that stillness, when perfectly aligned with physics, becomes power. So when the infrared camera tilts down over the jungle's litter and reveals a single coiled void among the glow, we see not a random ambush, but the footprint of an ancient algorithm. The question then lingers, heavy and humid in the air. Does the Bushmaster choose its place, or does the forest, through thermal math, choose it for him? Morning arrives in the rainforest not as a burst of light, but as a gradual illumination. Layer by layer, the canopy warms until color seeps back into the world. Dew gathers on bromeliad cups, thin threads of mist spiral upward, and in the under-canopy gloom, something electric flickers. A tiny frog, no larger than a thumb joint, hops across the surface of a moss-covered root. Its skin blazes in impossible hues, cobalt blue laced with black constellations, or gold that seems to burn even in shadow. It is not camouflage. It is a declaration: I am dangerous. Poison dart frogs, family Dendrobatidae, are the rainforest's most unapologetic liars and truth-tellers at once. Their color warns predators of the alkaloid toxins embedded in their skin, potent neurochemicals derived from the ants, mites and beetles they eat. A single milligram from the skin of Philobates terribilis, the golden poison frog, can stop a human heart. And yet, not all who wear these bright uniforms are equally armed. Across the Amazon and Choco rainforests, scientists have found morphs with the same dazzling palette but wildly differing toxin levels, from lethal concentrations to barely measurable traces. This variability has led to a provocative question. Could some frogs be bluffing? The idea is called color inflation. In economic terms, it suggests that natural selection may favor frogs whose warning colors exaggerate their true toxicity, allowing them to save metabolic energy that would otherwise be spent producing or sequestering alkaloids. For a creature weighing only a few grams, the cost of maintaining high chemical defenses can be immense, requiring not only a steady diet of toxic prey, but biochemical pathways to store and resist the compounds internally. But pigments, those can be produced endogenously, often through pathways shared with other metabolic functions like immune defense or antioxidant regulation. In theory, a frog could amplify its signal, brighter, glossier, more saturated, while quietly reducing the expensive part, the poison itself. To understand this, one must look not at individual frogs, but at entire communities, what evolutionary biologists call aposematic networks. In these systems, the reliability of color as a signal depends on collective honesty. Predators learn through experience. A tanager or snake that once bit a toxic frog will hesitate when it sees similar colors again. But if enough liars emerge, vividly colored yet weakly toxic individuals, the system begins to unravel. Predators, emboldened by mixed experiences, start testing the signal again. For color inflation to persist, bluffers must remain rare or indistinguishable from the truly toxic majority. It is an arms race of perception and probability. In the rainforest, such dynamics play out in microcosms across a single hillside. On one slope, the same species may appear deep indigo, across the next ridge, orange and black. Genetic studies show that these color morphs interbreed where their ranges overlap, creating zones of gradient, a living spectrum of warning strategies. Field researchers use ultraviolet sensitive cameras to measure brightness the way birds see it, revealing that what looks equally vibrant to humans is often hierarchically ordered in avian vision. Some frogs radiate in UV reflectance far beyond human range, signals likely tailored to specific predator eyes. But when scientists compare these spectral readings with chemical assays of skin alkaloids, the pattern fractures. the brightest frogs are not always the most toxic. In fact, in some populations, the inverse holds true. Individuals with amplified coloration have lower alkaloid loads. It's a paradox that speaks to the fluid economics of survival. If predators judge risk based on appearance alone, investing in costly toxins becomes inefficient. The jungle, it seems, allows room for liars, provided they lie convincingly. The logic echoes across evolution. Many coral reef fish display aposematic coloration without venom. Hoverflies mimic wasps. Milk snakes copy coral snakes' banding. But poison dart frogs represent something more complex. They are both model and mimic within the same lineage, their degrees of toxicity fluctuating with geography, diet, and even season. In regions where toxic ants are abundant, selection pressures favor genuine chemical defense. Where such prey is scarce, color becomes theater, the performance of danger sustained by collective memory. This interplay between signal and substance has measurable energetic consequences. Laboratory trials reveal that frogs with lower toxin levels show higher growth rates and greater reproductive success, likely due to reduced metabolic load. Yet their survival depends entirely on the reliability of their costume. Too many fakes and the predators adapt. Nature, in its ruthless accounting, allows bluffing only when the illusion serves the whole. The rainforest, like any economy, punishes inflation that goes too far. At the microscopic level, this drama continues in the very architecture of frog skin. Specialized dermal cells called chromatophores stack in layers, melanophores at the bottom, reflecting dark tones, iridophores in the middle, scattering light into blues and greens through nanoscopic platelets, and xanthophores on top, filtering yellows and reds. The interaction of these layers, adjusted by hormones and light exposure, creates the frog's radiant spectrum. Some species can subtly shift hue depending on humidity and temperature, tuning their brightness to local conditions. It is not conscious deception, but physiological plasticity, the machinery of bluff refined by evolution. Meanwhile, predators interpret these signals through their own sensory biases. Birds with tetrachromatic vision are more attuned to UV bright signals than snakes, whose color perception is muted but heat sensitivity is acute. Thus, a frog's color may not only deter visual predators but also advertise to the thermal senses of pit vipers, its glossy surface reflecting ambient warmth, creating a false signal of danger even in infrared. The deception extends across senses, woven into the physical laws of perception. To test the balance between truth and bluff, researchers stage controlled experiments, side-by-side displays of frog models painted to exact color spectra, paired with skin extracts of known toxicity. Birds are then released into enclosures and their attack hesitation times recorded. The results are astonishingly consistent. Brightness correlates more strongly with deterrence than actual chemical potency. In other words, predators believe their eyes more than the biochemistry behind them. The jungle runs on faith. Yet color inflation carries long-term risks. Climate shifts, habitat fragmentation, and changes in insect diversity alter the availability of toxic prey. As more frogs lose access to their chemical arsenal, populations may tilt toward bluffing. Over time, predator learning could collapse the signal's credibility, leading to catastrophic increases in mortality. The arms race would reset, forcing the next generation to rebuild toxicity or perish trying. Evolution, as ever, oscillates between truth and deception, never settling long enough to declare a victor. In the field, beneath a bromeliad pool reflecting filtered sunlight, a trio of dart frogs bask motionlessly. Their colors, one electric yellow, one sky blue, one ember red, glow through the mist as if lit from within. Tiny ants crawl over their skin unharmed. The frogs' toxins deter almost everything larger. Each one is a hypothesis made flesh. How much truth does a warning need to work? A nearby snake watches, tongue flicking. It hesitates, not out of wisdom, but uncertainty. The color speaks louder than any chemical ever could. The frogs, meanwhile, remain still, their survival balanced on the thin line between honesty and illusion. So the question lingers beneath the canopy hum, beneath the drone of insects, and the distant thunder of rain. In a world where color itself can kill, can a lie truly be cheaper than poison? The rainforest does not answer. It simply keeps watching and remembering. The rainforest floor trembles with a quiet pulse, not from the steps of giants, but from the endless rhythm of millions of feet, smaller than a grain of rice. Under the dense canopy where light barely filters through, highways of leaf-cutter ants stretch like living veins across the earth. Each path is a polished groove, carved by generations of traffic, carrying the bright confetti of leaf fragments toward underground cities vast enough to rival the chambers of a termite mound. It is here in the ordered chaos of these insect civilizations that the Amazon reveals one of its most intricate equations, the balance between sacrifice and survival. Leafcutter ants, belonging to the genera Atta and Acromyrmex, are engineers of the forest, sculptors of soil, harvesters of photosynthetic energy, and farmers of fungus. Their world is built on chemical order. Every movement, from a single ant's hesitant turn to the synchronized streams of foragers, is guided by pheromone trails, invisible scent highways laid and reinforced molecule by molecule. The system is efficient to the point of elegance. Scouts locate new leaves, mark routes, and thousands follow, carrying neatly cut fragments to nourish the fungus gardens that feed the colony. Yet beneath this perfection lies a hidden defense, a strategy that seems almost paradoxical. When threatened, the ants sometimes create what appear to be dummy lines, decoy trails of expendable workers sent out to mislead predators or parasites away from the real foraging streams. At first glance, this behavior looks like chaos. Ants scattering, forming irregular side paths that seem to lead nowhere. But under infrared video and chemical analysis, a pattern emerges. The pheromone signatures on these false trails are weaker, diluted versions of the main route, yet just strong enough to attract attention from would-be attackers. Parasitic phorid flies, which hover above trails to lay eggs inside living ants, often follow these decoys, drawn by the familiar scent but finding fewer hosts. Similarly, small lizards and army ants that specialize in ambushing leafcutters are lured into less defended areas, while the true workforce continues unimpeded. In essence, the colony burns energy and lives as bait to protect its most productive flow. To grasp why this makes sense, one must abandon human notions of individual worth. In a colony of several million, no single worker holds identity. Each is a temporary extension of the superorganism. The colony itself is the enduring entity, the sum of its bodies and signals. A single worker's cost is negligible compared to the loss of a mature fungal garden or a major foraging route. When danger strikes, evolution has favored not the survival of the ant, but the survival of the network. The dummy line is the network's immune reflex, a local inflammation designed to draw the pathogen's focus away from vital tissue. In the wild, Researchers have documented this phenomenon in remarkable detail. After experimental disturbances, a simulated predator attack, or the introduction of parasitic flies, colonies quickly produce lateral trails branching off the main path. Within minutes, traffic divides, forming what appears to be inefficiency. But after the threat passes, only one path remains active. The others fade as pheromones dissipate and workers are recalled. When scientists tracked ant counts before and after such events, they noted consistent losses among the side trails, but statistically fewer casualties in the primary transport line. The colony, in essence, sacrifices its outer digits to preserve its core. Such behavioral plasticity relies on the ant's extraordinary ability to self-organize through local feedback. No overseer commands these sacrifices. Instead, individual ants respond to micro-cues: pheromone concentration, vibration, the scent of alarm, generating complex patterns from simple rules. When a section of trail becomes saturated with alarm pheromone, it triggers bifurcation behavior. Nearby workers instinctively create new trails with diluted chemical intensity. These weaker routes naturally attract a subset of followers, creating the illusion of purposeful misdirection. From the outside, it appears strategic. From the inside, it is algorithmic emergence. The colony performs sacrifice not through choice, but through evolved computation. Predators, in turn, are shaped by this deception. The tiny phorid flies, unable to resist the scent of forager pheromones, waste precious minutes probing empty roots. Their larvae, dependent on living ant hosts, often perish before completing development. Lizards that ambush near heavily trafficked lines lose position when the ants split, forced to relocate as the dummy line dissipates. The ants' small-scale misdirection echoes the tactics of schools of fish or flocks of birds, confusion as defense multiplied across terrain. This form of collective sacrifice challenges traditional definitions of intelligence. There is no foresight here, only selection's memory encoded in chemistry. Over evolutionary time, colonies that bled a few workers to preserve the flow of the many outcompeted those that didn't. The cost of deception became an investment written into the reflex architecture of the species. The result is a civilization that understands, in its own non-cognitive way, that sometimes survival demands deliberate waste. The ecological ripples extend beyond the colony. Leafcutters are among the primary herbivores of the Amazon. They can strip entire trees in days and move tons of organic material underground each year. Their trails carve permanent channels through leaf litter, shaping microhabitats for beetles, fungi, and mosses. The fungus they cultivate, Leucoagaricus gongylophorus, depends entirely on them for propagation. In return, it converts cellulose into digestible sugars, sustaining the colony's energy economy. If a major trail is compromised, fungal production drops, nutrient cycling slows, and the surrounding micro-ecosystem feels the pulse of loss. Thus, the dummy line is not mere defense. It is insurance for the rainforest's metabolism. Under magnification, one can see how every caste within the colony participates in this system of distributed risk. The smaller workers, minims, maintain the fungus and nurse the brood deep inside. Medium foragers gather leaves. Massive soldiers, their heads like armored shields, patrol the highways. When predators attack, it is often the medium foragers, numerous, replaceable, anonymous, who populate the dummy lines. Their bodies become expendable pixels in a living mosaic of protection. The soldiers, more resource-intensive to produce, guard the core traffic. Even death follows hierarchy. To test this dynamic, biologists have conducted track banding experiments, artificially blocking sections of trail to simulate loss, then monitoring reconstruction. The results show astonishing resilience. Within hours, new paths form, often parallel to the old, with workers redistributing themselves according to pheromone gradients. When a predation event is simulated, colonies spontaneously form secondary ghost trails, less traveled, shorter lived, but consistently positioned between the nest and threat. Once safety is restored, these ghost routes vanish, as if the forest itself swallowed their memory. Beneath the camera lens, it's tempting to see individuality in their movements. The hesitation before a forager joins a new line, the purposeful crossing of a soldier to patrol an empty path. But these gestures are products of feedback loops honed through millions of years. What we interpret as bravery or strategy is simply an emergent consequence of chemical logic. Evolution has no sentiment, only efficiency that appears emotional from afar. At dusk, when rain begins to fall and the forest breathes in its own mist, the leafcutters retreat underground. Their highways gleam faintly from polished soil, empty now but ready to pulse again at dawn. In the chambered darkness below, the queen rests among the hum of her daughters, a single organism made of thousands of bodies, still vibrating with the day's work and losses. The dummy lines have faded. The cost of defense has been paid in the currency of expendable lives. The colony survives, not because it avoids death, but because it knows how to spend it. And so the question becomes more than entomological. It is philosophical. When does wasting workers save the colony? In a world built on competition and decay, the answer is both brutal and beautiful, when life organizes itself around endurance, not empathy. The leafcutters teach that the health of the whole sometimes demands the loss of the many, a truth written not in ethics, but in pheromones. The rainforest, indifferent yet precise, keeps the ledger balanced. Morning over the Blackwater oxbow. Mist rises from the surface like breath from a sleeping animal, curling into gold as sunlight strikes the slow-moving river. The forest edges glow, a mirror of shadow and reflection, where every ripple doubles itself. Then the silence fractures. A rolling series of barks, trills and yelps ricochet across the lagoon. The calls overlap, rise, fall, merge, and rebound against the water's skin until the air feels carved by noise. Moments later, a swirl of brown bodies surfaces in unison. Giant otters, the loudest predators of the Amazon's rivers, moving like a single organism stitched together by sound. To the untrained ear, their cacophony seems chaotic, a carnival of whistles, squeaks and growls with no discernible order. But beneath that audible riot lies structure. Each note carries context, alarm, reassurance, coordination, or deception. Giant otters, Pteronura brasiliensis, live within one of the most acoustically complex societies in the mammalian world. Their colonies, often family units of 6 to 12, communicate with more than 15 distinct call types, layered into sequences that shift depending on urgency and social role. What appears as noise is language, and sometimes weapon. The river they command is not merely a landscape, but a resonant body. Sound travels here 5 times faster than through air, bending and amplifying along the contours of roots, shallows, and current seams. For the otters, sound is both compass and clay, something to navigate by and something to mold. And this leads to one of the Amazon's more curious hypotheses. that these social predators may use decoy chatter not only to coordinate, but to shape the behavior of their prey. Could it be that the otter's exaggerated alarm calls, sudden bursts of high-pitched frantic chatter, are not always warning each other, but intentionally frightening fish into scatter patterns that make them easier to catch? To explore that idea, scientists have begun pairing hydrophones, underwater microphones, with sonar imaging. The results reveal a choreography almost invisible to the human eye. When the otters dive, they emit a specific burst of chaotic noise resembling the vocal patterns of panic. Fish sonar shows that in the seconds following, schools that were once tight and unified suddenly fragment, breaking into smaller clusters that dart toward the edges of the lagoon. Within that confusion, the otters reposition, a coordinated pincer movement that funnels the fleeing prey into shallows or against submerged logs, where capture becomes inevitable. What looks like random commotion from above is, in truth, acoustic sculpture, predation through organized disarray. The evolutionary logic is compelling. Fish are exquisitely sensitive to vibration. Their lateral line systems detect minute pressure changes, converting them into electrical signals that map the flow of water around their bodies. In a stable environment, a schooling fish relies on that flow to maintain synchrony with its neighbors, a behavior that confuses predators by presenting a moving wall of bodies. But a sudden acoustic burst, particularly in the low-frequency range of otter calls, floods that sensory field with interference. The fish's neural system, overwhelmed by noise, breaks formation in milliseconds. The otters exploit that dissonance like musicians striking a single discordant chord to shatter silence. What makes this even more remarkable is the degree of coordination required. Giant otters hunt as families, not as random mobs. Each individual plays a role: flankers, divers, surface watchers. Their communication must therefore operate on dual channels, one to manipulate prey perception and another to synchronize predator behavior. The decoy chatter becomes a double agent in the soundscape, misleading one audience while directing another. Some researchers suspect the otters vary tone and rhythm deliberately, tuning their calls to the acoustic properties of different water bodies. In narrow creeks, they favor short, percussive bursts that bounce between banks. In open lagoons, longer modulated cries ripple outward like sonic nets. From the fish's perspective, such manipulation is devastating. To them, the water's surface is both barrier and warning line. Any loud, sudden vibration often signals danger: the plummet of a bird, the dive of a caiman. When a pod of otters begins their rolling vocal barrage, the water becomes an echo chamber of panic cues. The fish, obeying their evolutionary instincts, do the one thing that guarantees their death. They flee together into channels that the otters have already encircled. At a behavioral level, the tactic resembles flush hunting used by wolves and dolphins, species that use movement or noise to drive prey into ambush zones. But unlike air or land predators, the otters operate in a medium that amplifies every decibel. A single group can dominate several square kilometers of acoustic territory, excluding rivals and intimidating competitors. Hydrophone recordings reveal that their morning choruses, the explosive group barks that echo at dawn, often precede feeding sessions. It is as though the colony announces not only ownership, but intent. Such sound-based manipulation has ecological consequences that ripple beyond the hunt. By influencing how fish schools move, giant otters indirectly shape nutrient flow in the water column. Panic dispersal drives sediment clouds, redistributing organic material and oxygen levels. The very act of predation stirs the river's chemistry, linking communication to ecosystem function. In this sense, the otter's voices extend their bodies, not just tools for social cohesion, but engines of environmental architecture. Underwater footage deepens the complexity. When viewed through thermal and acoustic overlays, each otter's movement seems synchronized to microseconds. A dive here, a surfacing there, timed with the decay of a preceding call. Researchers liken it to an underwater orchestra, where every player follows an inaudible conductor. The pattern repeats across colonies separated by hundreds of kilometers, suggesting cultural transmission. Young otters, born into the chorus, learn the syntax of noise through imitation. Their early babbling, soft chirps and moans, evolves into full participation, just as human infants learn speech. What begins as chaos becomes, over time, composition. But the line between communication and deception blurs. If the otter's panic calls are tools of manipulation, then honesty becomes negotiable. Like the ocelot's mimicry of prey calls or the poison frog's color inflation, this is another example of signal strategy, the use of perception itself as a weapon. The rainforest is a constant contest of information. Who can control what is seen, heard, or believed? In the otter's case, sound is both truth and illusion, carrying reassurance to kin and terror to prey. Observers often describe the giant otter as playful, an image reinforced by their constant vocalizing and apparent curiosity. But that liveliness conceals precision. Beneath the laughter of their calls lies a form of acoustic intelligence as disciplined as any predator's stealth. They are sonic engineers, sculpting behavior through resonance, their every note a calculation of physics and fear. By dusk, as the heat softens and insects take over the airwaves, the otters retreat to their dens, burrows carved into muddy banks, their entrances hidden beneath overhanging roots. The lagoon grows quiet again, its earlier chaos now a memory drifting beneath the surface. Small fish resume schooling, tentative, reknitting their torn geometry. The water regains its calm, though traces of vibration still hum faintly through it, the ghosts of pressure waves that once carved confusion. The river, like a drumhead, remembers sound long after the players have left. In that lingering resonance, one can almost hear the echo of strategy. Noise turned into geometry, communication turned into control. The question remains, suspended between science and wonder: can noise sculpt a shoal like hands sculpt clay? In the case of the giant otter, the answer ripples through the black water. Yes, and it does so with exquisite, deafening grace. Midday in the floodplain. The air is motionless, the heat so dense it seems to press the jungle downward, flattening even the breeze. Between the buttressed trees, the backwaters hold their breath, a pane of liquid glass so still that dragonflies hover above their own reflections, and the mirrored sky appears more real than the one above it. Beneath this deceptive calm, just beneath the shimmer where light breaks into color, something ancient waits. A pair of eyes, motionless and patient, peers from the film of the surface. They belong to a caiman, the living geometry of ambush, suspended between water and air, still enough to erase itself. Caimans are among the Amazon's oldest engineers of stillness. As sit-and-wait predators, they survive by doing nothing with perfection. While jaguars stalk and otters coordinate, the caiman weaponizes patience. Yet, new observations suggest its stillness may serve a more sophisticated purpose than camouflage alone. When the forest canopy aligns with the water's surface, tree trunks mirrored into vertical pillars of light and shadow, prey approaching the edge, see not a body below, but an unbroken reflection of the world above. This optical deception, a phenomenon scientists are beginning to call the mirror trap, transforms the caiman's hunting ground into an illusion chamber where perception itself collapses. To understand this ambush theater, one must begin with light. In calm water, the air-water boundary behaves as a near-perfect mirror. The angle at which light hits determines what is reflected versus what is refracted into the depths. For an animal standing at the edge, a heron, a capybara, or even a fish gliding near the surface, the image they see depends on this critical angle. Under ideal conditions, at about 40 to 50 degrees relative to the surface, the surrounding forest replaces the true underwater scene entirely. What exists below becomes invisible. When a caiman positions itself within that optical boundary, aligning its low, flat skull exactly parallel to the surface, its silhouette merges with the reflection. The result is predation by physics, a weaponized mirage. Drone footage over oxbow lakes shows this geometry in exquisite detail. From above, a caiman's outline seems distinct, a narrow snout, armored back, a gentle V-shape trailing behind. But from a heron's or rodent's perspective at the edge, the same water appears opaque, a perfect mirror of leaves, clouds, and light shafts. Even the caiman's eyes, protruding like small domes, distort the reflection in ways that mimic ripples or leaf shadows. The predator becomes a distortion within a distortion, hiding not by absence, but by participation in the visual field. What elevates this strategy from passive concealment to active manipulation is how caimans choose their stage. Studies using motion-triggered cameras and LiDAR mapping reveal that ambush sites are not random. Caimans consistently position themselves along banks where the water remains calm longest, natural wind shadows behind fallen logs or root tangles, and where reflected light produces maximal glare. Some individuals return to these same microsites nightly, suggesting learned preference. The glassier the surface, the stronger the illusion. Even their approach behavior seems designed to preserve that stillness. The final movement before submergence is executed at angles minimizing wake, each motion absorbing into the viscosity of water rather than disturbing it. Once settled, the caiman's sensory suite completes the trap. Beneath the waterline, integumentary sensory organs, microscopic pressure receptors dotting the jaws, detect even the faintest vibration. A capybara's footfall sends a signature ripple across the mirrored field. A fish breaking the meniscus leaves a pressure map no eye could see. These signals travel faster and more reliably than light, allowing the caiman to see through touch what optics deny. The predator, cloaked by reflection, reads the world through disturbance. The strike, when it comes, is not a lunge, but an equation resolved. The caiman calculates distance through soundless waiting, then releases the stored energy of stillness in a single pivot. The jaws break the surface at a 45-degree arc, precisely the same angle that previously erased the predator's form. Water and light collapse together. The mirror shatters. Prey rarely understands what happened. For a moment, air and water mix in the chaos of droplets and muscle, then close again as if nothing occurred. Stillness reclaims its reign, the surface smoothing back into perfection within seconds. From an ecological perspective, this reflective hunting mode has consequences for how animals use river edges. Small mammals and birds that drink during midday, when reflection is strongest, suffer the highest predation rates. In response, many species shift their activity to dawn or dusk, when surface distortion by insects and breeze weakens the mirror's hold. Thus, the caiman indirectly shapes the daily rhythms of entire food webs. Its patience rearranges time itself. The mirror trap may also serve a thermoregulatory function. Still, water maximizes radiant heat exchange, allowing caimans to fine-tune body temperature with minimal motion. By remaining half submerged in reflective pools, they absorb solar energy indirectly, the light bouncing from both sky and water. The same optical perfection that hides them also stabilizes them. Evolution, in this sense, has fused physics and physiology into one seamless design. From a human viewpoint, it's easy to misread this calm as laziness, a reptile's inertia in the tropical heat. But beneath that immobility lies acute sensory awareness. The caiman's brain, though small, devotes enormous processing capacity to spatial prediction and timing. Slow metabolism gives it patience. Reflex speed gives it success. When we observe them through a drone lens hovering high above, their precision becomes mathematical, each individual placed at an angle that maximizes both invisibility and strike potential. Across a flooded plain, it resembles a grid of waiting points, the river's version of a minefield designed by evolution. Interestingly, reflections also confuse the caiman's competitors. Giant otters, for example, rely on visual recognition of shapes near the surface. In mirror conditions, they often misjudge distance and attack from the wrong angle, allowing the caiman to slip away or counter. Even aerial predators like herons and egrets suffer from the illusion. They overestimate depth, skewing their strike trajectories. Thus, the mirror trap protects the hunter not only from prey detection, but from interference. It is an ecological shield as much as a weapon. The phenomenon challenges our assumptions about predation. We often imagine active pursuit, speed, claws, struggle. Yet here, killing is achieved through the control of perception. The caiman wins by dictating what others can and cannot see. The weapon is not tooth or tail, but reflection itself, an element so ordinary it goes unnoticed until it betrays you. By late afternoon, as humidity thickens and thunderheads rise, the first raindrops fall. Each one shatters a fragment of the mirror, exploding the stillness into chaos. The caiman drifts away, its advantage gone. The water surface, now stippled with impact rings, turns opaque not from reflection, but from movement. For the next hours, no hunting will occur. The predator waits again, not for prey this time, but for calm, for the physics of the mirror to reassemble. When the storm passes and the last ripples fade, the glass returns. A faint glow of evening filters through the canopy, duplicating itself across the water. Somewhere beneath, the caiman slides back into place, perfectly aligned, perfectly silent. The jungle stares at its own reflection, unaware that beneath its mirrored face, death waits with the patience of light. The question remains, suspended between biology and physics. Is the dead calm surface a passive accident or an active weapon? In the world of the caiman, the answer is visible only when it breaks, a reminder that even stillness, when wielded with precision, can kill.